Hi, welcome to SEO Space Lab, a webinar series where we look at the newest and most exciting phenomena in the SEO cosmos. It's a series of webinars that run from April 16th through May 14th and takes you on a trip through the galaxy of technical SEO with fellow experts. Don't forget to use the hashtag SEO Space Lab. And in today's episode, we'll talk about how to use Google APIs with Python for content optimization. Don't forget to ask your question using the chat section, and we'll answer them at the end. My name is Clément. I'm customer success manager at OnCrawl. I have a strong technical SEO background from my previous experiences. I've been based in Montreal for the past 4 years. I worked as lead consultant SEO for one of the biggest companies in the banking industry in Canada. And I'll be your host for this episode. My guest today for this exciting episode is Sasha Dagayev from Power Digital. Sasha.
Hey guys, my name is Sasha. I'm the Executive Vice President at Power Digital Marketing. We are a full-service digital marketing agency. Before joining Power Digital, I had my own firm called Factorial Digital. We were only SEO focused and very much focused on technical issues. My background is largely on technical crawl optimizations and technical content, so meaning like machine produced content and stuff like that. That's really where a lot of my focus is.
Cool. Can you change the slide? Thanks. So here is our flight plan for today. In the first part, I'm going to talk about content optimization to make sure that you have a good understanding of it and that is front in your mind. And then I'm going to show you a case study, which is a project that I worked on, where I successfully applied a content optimization strategy. In the second part, Sasha is going to show you his own technique for doing basically the same thing I did in my projects, but much faster and in a more efficient way. And in the last part, we will answer your questions. So don't forget to send your questions in the chat. So first, what is content optimization? I wanted to find a definition on the internet, so you can change the slide. And I will give you a few minutes to read it. But basically, what you need to keep in mind is that the process of optimizing the content is about to become more attractive, useful, and actionable to users. So when to use content optimization strategy? First, when you have a large amount of content on your site, that is not optimized for SEO or that hasn't been reworked in a while. When there is a willingness to create sustainable content assets for your websites, or when you cannot necessarily move forward on technical and or popularity issues. So, and I hope you can well see the screenshots, but I wanted to present you two main tactics. The first one is the re-optimization. So when you have a large amount of content on your website that is not well optimized for SEO, and you know there is a potential to improve the ranking, you can use this strategy. And as you can see on the left, in 2017 we have like different rankings, and in 2018 we had better rankings. And basically what we did is just to optimize the content of the page. The second tactic is about creation. So you don't really have a lot of content on your website, but you want to have more content. And so it's an opportunity based on keyword research. You don't really know the potential of this kind of SERP. But again, on the screenshot, you can see on the left that we didn't have rankings in 2017, and then in 2018 we had better or good rankings for this kind of keyword. I wanted to share with you a high-level case study. It's about optimizing a blog. So a few years ago, as I was working for a company in the banking industry, they asked me to work on the blog. It was they had like 6,000 pages, and it was in French and in English, and they didn't really had an SEO strategy at that time, and they wanted to be sure that we can improve the link between the content pages and the money pages of the website, and also to improve the ranking and have way more traffic. Basically, it's the process I used in this case with my team. The first step was to crawl the website and analyze specific KPIs that I will share with you after. Then we had to analyze the contents, and on this part I needed to go into details, and I dealt with each page individually. So basically I wanted to analyze the contents and make sure we have the good topics to rank on specific keywords. And we did that manually, and I think here it's pretty interesting because with Sasha's technique, you can do it way more faster. So I wanted to categorize the pages of the blog in order to know what I need to optimize. So on a website, you have different, if I can say, categories when talking about content. So the first one is the up-to-date category. So those are articles that has been recently updated or optimized. So it's generally does not require action. The most interesting, thank you. The most interesting category here is the action required. So you need to identify specific pages where you can be sure that you can improve the content and improve the rankings. And there are two different categories, subcategories in this category. The first one is the one that doesn't really need or just need slight modifications in order to improve the ranking. And the second one is more time consuming. You need to rework entirely the page in order to be sure that you can rank on a specific topic. And the last category is the obsolete category. So I wanted to talk a bit about crawl budget here. So we had 6,000 pages, and at the beginning we had half of the pages which were obsolete. So on this specific parts, those are pages that are not useful anymore to your users, and there is no way to use this page, these pages. So you can delete those pages. And I saw on that case that while I was deleting a lot of pages, and also I was optimizing the rest of the pages, my ranking were improving. So there were they were a relationship between the crawl budget and the relevance of my pages. So for sure, you do want with your crawl budget to have your money pages crawled. And if you have a lot of obsolete pages, it could be an issue as the crawl budget is limited on the website. So if you delete or if you rework those pages, you will have good results. I just wanted to share some KPIs I used when I was working on this strategy. So I took a lot of SEO KPIs that are pretty clear, I think, but I wanted also to pinpoint some of them. So I was working with other teams that didn't really that didn't really care about SEO. So I had to coordinate to make sure we were working in complementary ways. So I also wanted to analyze the paid media traffic and the newsletter traffic in order to be sure that even if my SEO KPIs are pretty bad, if the content was used on specific channels, I could keep it. Also, I used read rates, which is pretty interesting. So we implemented some trackers on content pages in order to be sure that the users are reading the content. So we had like triggers on the pages that were saying to us if the content was read and how much the content was read. And it really helped us to understand the relationship between the quality of the content and the user behavior. So you can use this kind of metric in that kind of strategy. So here are the results. So it was at the beginning, it was a blog in French and in English of 6,000 pages. At the end, we got rid of half of the pages. We optimized 25% of the pages, and the traffic increased by 222% in 16 months. And at the end, we on the English part, we had 100K of our organic users a month. So that are pretty good results. And it was really time consuming for me and my team as we did a lot manually. And I think with Sasha's technique, it will be really, really more faster and much efficient. So I let Sasha present his technique.
Cool. Thank you for passing it over. So today's presentation is really a combination about using two tools. One is Google Collab, which is Google's open source Python scripting notebook. And the other one is Google AI NLP. Now, Google AI NLP is not open source, but you get something like the first 100,000 requests for free. So, and over that, the API costs are very, very reasonable. So I highly recommend you guys check both of these tools out. And hopefully a lot of the conversation here doesn't just inspire you to use this technique, but also inspires you to kind of use these tools for a wider range of different tasks. So story is like, what are we trying to do, right? So on Google's NLP API, right? This is the demo that they always show, right? So you give it a piece of text, you tell it you're not a robot, right? Everyone's gonna watch me do some captchas. See, I'm not a robot. And you can see that Google takes this piece of content and breaks down what this content is about, right? In an automated way. Now, this is pretty interesting, right? Because this is a fairly ambivalent piece of content, right? Let's try something harder. Let's do something like George Washington, right? And let's take the first paragraph, the first couple of paragraphs of Wikipedia and see what Google says here. Okay. All right. It looks like it did pretty well, right? It said that, hey, this piece of content that you just pasted in, the main topic area is George Washington, right? It's 82% of it's the how central is George Washington about the Wikipedia article about George Washington, and you can see that it's pretty damn high, right? It's 0.82. So as expected, right? That this is the central idea within this article. The second one is president, statesman, military general, so on and so forth. You can see that other things are still mentioned here, but they're not as important by the salient score. Now, this is pretty interesting and pretty interesting technique because it tells you kind of, it's, in my opinion, a much clearer way to give guidance to a content team of things that you want them to write about and really what the central topics are of a given conversation, rather than just saying like, hey, I need 1,000 words, I need 2,000 words, say the word president 8 times, we're gonna rank #1, right? Clearly not the case, right? And so what you wanna do is you wanna kind of approach it with a more systematic and a more numbers-driven way. Now, obviously, copying and pasting your competitor content or your content into this box is a little bit tiresome. There's no export. It's hard to compare. So I built essentially a script to automatically do this. And let me kind of walk you through why that's important. So typically in my role, right, I always get the same question, right? Our content's the best. Why is somebody else ranking above me? I always say, at least this is my approach, is that there's 3 main pillars. There's technical, backlinks, and then there's your content. And this piece of kind of this piece of tech that we're going to debut today is much more about the content. Right? And the target that we're going to be working on is the search keto diet, right? This is a very competitive term. I think on Ahrefs, it's something like north of 80 on the keyword difficulty out of 100. So it's very, very competitive. And it's kind of hard to understand, kind of like, okay, you're writing about a keto diet. What should you be writing about, right? And again, we're going to be using this, the Google API, Natural Language Processing API, and we're going to be using it, we're going to be running that script using Google's Collab network. Now, Google Collab on its own, and I'll just start a new one just to show you guys how easy it is a fantastic tool because it's something that lets you easily use all of your Python scripts and everything else much easier than typical, right? And so you can see here, I can do arbitrary statements here like 1 + 1. Hold on, it's running, okay, right? And I can just arbitrarily add Python code without any setup. Now, for people that have played around, and I'm sure a lot of people in this webinar have either played around with JavaScript, played around with Python to help automate some of their tasks, the hardest part of the process is getting started, right? And using Google's Collab network, what you can do is you can get started with code right away. There is no kind of like setup, as you saw, right? Like I can get started right away. It's the same level of difficulty as opening up a Google Sheet. And the other killer feature is that you can share using Google's authentication, meaning that if somebody has a Gmail account, you can easily just send them the link and it will work on their computer the same way that it's worked on your computer. Now, obviously, this is much more superior to GitHub for our purposes, right? Because as SEOs, we work with a lot of content people, a lot of PR people that don't have dev environment set up to run a lot of this complex code. And so if you want to share a lot of these tools with them, it's just as easy as giving them a Google Sheet and then having them run the code, right? And so the other kind of like killer benefit of it is that you're running on top of Google's infrastructure. And the killer feature of that is that it's super well supported, right? You're running with a tool that right now is being used, like this same kind of like software package is being used in academic environments, in medical environments, in financial environments. So it's a high throughput tool that you're not just like depending on, a small team of volunteers to upkeep. You're depending on a very large team to kind of like make sure this thing works. So it's highly dependable, meaning that if you write something, chances are is that it will still work next year, it will still work in 2 years, so on and so forth, right? The other killer thing is that it's on the cloud, right? So that means that I don't know how it is in your guys' work environments, but within our work environments, we have people that work on a Linux machine, work on a Chromebook, work on an Apple machine, and work on a Windows machine, right? It stinks for kind of sharing applications, but given that everything is living in the cloud, you kind of like disambiguate all of those difficulties. The other thing is that it executes line by line, meaning that when you hit go, it doesn't just execute the entirety of the code. It executes executes it line by line. So for novices, people that are just starting to get into Python or just starting to get into coding in general, I know it can be frustrating when you have like 100 lines of code, something breaks, you can't figure it out, right? With this, you execute the code line by line. So it makes it really simple to understand, like, okay, this is the step where it's messing up. I'm going to look here and try to figure out what's wrong, right? And then the last part is that legacy things, right? So like public libraries. So for example, in this example, I'm using URL lib, which is a framework for just going to a site and downloading the HTML. It's not something that was built specifically for Google Collab, right? It's something that existed before, and it's really, really easy to use legacy tools inside of this new format, right? So, all right, I'm gonna stop talking about how awesome it is, and I'm gonna jump in and show you guys. All right. So after the presentation, we'll send out a link to this sheet. You guys can copy it and use it to as much as your heart desires. There's also written out instructions in the URL here if you miss something, or if I forget to mention something, right? So let's go through this line by line. So these are the main packages that we're going to be using. So these are these are things that are pre-installed that exist somewhere else, right? That we're going to be using within our code, right? Here, I had to. This is the credentials for the API. You can obtain yours by just going to this URL here and registering. You do have to put in a credit card, but again, you're not charged for the first 100,000. They just want credit cards for obvious reasons. This is the Google NLP client. So this line of code actually initiates the client and actually kind of like starts the NLP process. And so we'll execute that. Okay. So this actually sends the code, sends the web page to Google's NLP API and returns to us kind of like different entities. And this is just a definition of the API. This this function here takes the HTML, feeds it into the API, and then puts it all together into a nice, easy to analyze table for us. So we'll go ahead and run this. And here, this line of code actually gets the URLs, right? So for the purposes of this example, I took 3 very different sites. I took Healthline's keto diet article, Diet Doctor's keto diet article, and health at harvard.com, harvard.edu keto diet article. I run this API. So this is actually where everything kind of gets fed to the API. This is the more critical step here. See, it's running. Okay. And as you can see, this is, again, all running in the cloud, all running line by line, right? And the crazy part is that right after this call, I'm going to share with you guys the link, and there will be no configuration. You don't have to do like, you know, npm install. You don't have to do any virtual environments, nothing. Just hit go, click the enter button 7 times, and you'll get the same results I just got. So this portion here, actually, oh, sorry, because we're gonna be hitting the APIs one more time. 1 second. Okay, so this actually takes the results, and all right, and so here are all our results here. There's almost 2,000 rows and 6 columns, right? And so for each column, what I did is I said, for a specific entity, how important was it to the centrality of the argument from 1 to 0? And how many times was this central entity, so meaning this idea, mentioned in this article, right? And you can see here, the column definitions are here, right? This is within this interface, it's fairly unmanageable, right? Because you can't, it's hard to scroll within this. It's hard to, it's really doesn't play well for our other tools. So we can run it to an export and to run it as an export to a CSV. Hold on. And then we should show here, right? So you can see here, you can double click this and we have it as a nice CSV. You can download the CSV by doing a left click. And so I'm gonna share the results with you guys now. One second. Hold on. Whoops. Hold on one second. Slight technical difficulties. Okay. Well, we can open these up in. Clément, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. So, so as you guys can see, the entirety of the CSV is here. Let me just quickly upload it. Here. Hold on one second. Okay, so so here we can see that the main ideas here is that when you look at the keto diet analysis, we see that the word diet, right, is the main central argument within the Healthline article, which is actually pretty interesting because if you think about it, right, we're trying to rank, this is the #1 result for the word keto diet. And it's pretty interesting that the keto diet as a result is actually only 6% the more central point of the article, right? And that really what the article is much more about is general dieting rather than keto diet specifically, right? So it's interesting to kind of understand that, okay, well, when I work with a content person or my content freelancer, right? Maybe when we're kind of putting together our piece of content for keto dieting, we know that, hey, the central theme of what we want to be writing about isn't actually keto diet. It's actually just dieting in general, because that seems to be the way that the number one result for this topic is writing about it, rather than being hyper focused on the keto diet. Now, if we go to the #2 result, Diet Doctor, we can see that Diet Doctor actually over indexes on the word keto diet much more than the #1 result, almost double the centrality of the argument, right? And so now, again, this is much more interesting and much more of a way to kind of show a presentation to the rest of your content team in a way that makes it a little bit more digestible and a lot more quantifiable, because then you can kind of go ahead and make these changes and you can see how the variations are changing within your content in such a way where the feedback that you're giving them isn't just very general and saying like, hey, you should talk about this specific topic more. you can actually give them specific numbers and specific feedback and kind of really point them into the direction of, hey, what's working and what's not working. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Sasha. So time for questions. We have questions. Yeah, I have a question on my part. Was it important about where you redirected the obsolete pages? Yes. The decision I took, I split the obsolete pages in two categories. The first one was pages without any kind of traffic. So for those pages who were pretty, which were pretty old, I didn't want to redirect them because they didn't have any backlinks or any traffic. So I just deleted them, and yeah, I just deleted them, and I put a 410. For the other category, yes, I redirected those pages to categories on my blog that were that had a link with those pages, and yeah, basically that's it. Another question, well, will you be sharing the Google Collab, Sasha? So,
yeah, so we'll drop a link to kind of the instruction, which on how to run this on your own. Again, it's, as you saw, it's very easy. You just go to copy, paste, just like you would with a Google Sheet. There's a step-by-step instruction at this URL here.
There is another question for you. Is there any way to create some sort of scatter charts based on the data to report to clients via Google Collab?
So Collab runs like a Jupyter notebook. So there is a function called matplotlib, which is essentially a graphing utility. I'm not gonna lie, the graphing utility looks kind of ugly. That kind of ships with it. When I present it to clients, I usually export it to a CSV, and then I do the visualizations within you know, the prettier Excel, and you know, butter it up a little bit, or within Google Sheets. But really, the easiest way to do it is really just within an Excel.
Another question for you. Is there a way to load like 100 URLs and get the same boards you just show on the CSV?
Yep, so you can see here, so right now I wrote this for 3 URLs, right? You can hack, after this presentation, everyone's gonna have read-only access to this presentation. So what they can do is they can, you know, you can just add more URLs in here, right? So you can, you know, copy, paste, and make this response 4, and add some URL here, and then add some URL here, right? Or you can write a loop that kind of hits the API as many times as possible. Again, that's the kind of like the beauty of working with Google Labs, right? With Google Collab. So that way, yeah, you can use something like this.
Right. I think it's the last question. How would you compare the results from this API to tools like termslab.io? I don't know this tool personally.
Yeah, so there's a lot of APIs that use NLP technologies. I think that I don't know how most the back end of how most of these services work, right? And so so like the leap of faith that I'm doing is I'm saying that you can use Google's APIs or Amazon's natural language processing APIs to get the raw results, because it's very likely that whatever tool that your team is, the API that they're using is likely leveraging the results from either Amazon or Google. Personally, I would trust raw results from Google and Amazon, particularly because this is a big data problem, right? And those two companies have the most, I'm assuming, have the most data, right? And I would assume that their takeaways would be the best. This is my opinion. This is not a fact, right? I'm just saying that, like, using my logic, right, I would trust the raw results coming from those entities.
We have another question. How do you know that authority of the page about the main entity diet is not influencing directly to rank a specific keyword on the same semantic family as ketogenic diet?
Yeah, great question. So this is about making actionable changes, right? Let's say like you work at a keto specific, content site or whatever, and I told you that, hey, like the way to rank is to get 400 more links. Okay, right, like okay, you know what I mean? Like, what do you do now, right? Like, I'm just gonna get 400 authoritative links. It's very difficult, right? And so what might be better is to look at, okay, there's a competitor that's ranking with relatively little links on page one, right? The kind of like the same amount of links that we have, right? Let's kind of see how they're doing it, right? And kind of see, see how they are, how they're performing. I say, like, personally, I know that my clients get discouraged when I just tell them, hey, you just need more links, right? Because it's like, okay, like, I'm also telling them don't buy links, you know what I mean? So it's like, okay, like, my job is to make this rank. My boss is yelling at me about why we're not in the top 5, right? Like, and you're telling me that the only way to solve this is to buy something that of what you're telling me not to buy, right? And it's like, so I think it's like you kind of gotta. This is not a panacea. This is just a tool in your toolbox to kind of make some actionable changes to your site.
Yeah, I really agree on that. And what I was trying to say before is that you can really have good results without working on the popularity. And even sometimes for sure you have to have a good basis of technical, but you can really have good results on focusing on the content part. So yeah.
And then sorry, I know that in the presentation I wasn't able to show you guys the Excel, but if you look here, this is what the output looks like in Excel, right? And so you can see that we have all of these different themes here, right? How many times they were mentioned and how important they are to the centrality of the argument. Obviously, like, once it's in Excel, you can push it wherever, you can push it to your content teams or whatever, right? But I just thought that it was really helpful of how quickly you could go from Google Collab to something, something like this, a more familiar tool. And obviously, like, you can push a CSV into a Google Sheet or whatever you would like.
Sure. I think that's it for the questions. All right. So thank you, Sasha. Thank you everyone for your time and for sharing your own experiences. Our next SEO Space Lab episode will focus on how to navigate Google's transitions from search to answer engine with Kevin Indig, and it will take place this April 23rd. Don't forget to register on OnCrawl, follow hashtag SEO Space Lab, and join us for the next episode. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.